Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the coffee break. We have our final etap to finish. And so, please, Andy.
We will continue with the keynote lecture by Professor Peter Paul Verbeek, Chair of Philosophy Department of the University of Twente, the Netherlands. He is a member of the Dutch Council for Humanities and the chair of the Society for Philosophy and Technology. His research focuses on the philosophy of human-technology relations and aims to contribute to philosophical theory, ethical reflection, and practices of design and innovation. So these are also the main themes of this World Science Forum this year. He has been invited by the steering committee of the World Science Forum to give an introduction to the forum inspired by the main themes, science, ethics, and responsibility as the key words for all of us in the next 3 days. Please welcome on stage.
Thank you so much for this introduction. It's an honor to be here and to give you some thoughts that hopefully could be a bit inspiring in the coming days when together we'll think about science, ethics, and responsibility. And I would like to open my talk with a quote from this famous philosopher, Berlin, who a bit over 60 years ago gave his inaugural speech at Oxford University. And in that speech, he made a famous distinction between two types of freedom. Positive and negative freedom, he called them. Negative freedom, he says, is actually freedom taken as the absence of constraints, of forces, of powers around you. It's the freedom from something. Positive freedom, he said, is the freedom to do something, the freedom that has a positive kind of direction. And I think those two aspects of freedom also connect to scientific or academic freedom. Academic freedom is often seen as the absence of constraints, the absence of influences from outside. But it can also be something like a positive freedom for scientists, a freedom to contribute to our society. So I think this distinction can help us to understand better how to raise ethical questions regarding science and technology in our society. And maybe ultimately it could also help us to develop something that you could call positive ethics. And by that I do not mean that ethics should always say that something is good or something, that it's always positive, but positive ethics means an ethic that does not only want to formulate the negative, the constraints, what we should not do, but an ethics that should formulate the conditions for forms of flourishing, for science to flourish, for society to flourish. So that's what I hope to take you through. And it's actually not only science, but also technology that raises a lot of questions. Maybe in a different way there is positive and negative freedom for technology as well. If we think about science, typically people have a very positive feeling. It makes you happy. Einstein, you can even buy postcards of Einstein with his tongue out of his mouth. Science is good, is nice, makes you happy. Technology is a different Stein. It's Frankenstein for many people. It's scary. Technology is actually something that interferes in society a lot. And so where maybe people often think that science should be neutral, impartial, the truth and nothing but the truth should stay away from society a bit, people often fear how close technologies can be to our society. And actually you see that a lot. So freedom from, freedom to as a guideline to think about ethics. I want to address these issues in 3 lines. First, I would like to speak with you about the paradox of science, the paradox that comes from these 2 definitions of freedom, this freedom from and freedom to. It's 2 hearts that are beating in science, I think. The room to be independent and also the room to be engaged with our society. And we should learn to deal with that ambiguity. Now, second, I want to talk to you about how we could bring that in practice for science. Open science. We just heard that at UNESCO it was decided to work on a recommendation for open science. We'll say more about that later. Quite exciting. What could open science be? I think we need a next level of organizing the interaction between science and our society. And also for technology, we need a connection. Responsible design could be a slogan to work on that. So let's first go to the science paradox. The paradox basically comes down to a new formulation of the 2 types of freedom that I just gave to you. Science has to be many things for most people in our society. It has to be value-free, but also valuable. it has to be completely neutral, but also it has to be influential in our society. We want to invest money in science because the economy can grow, for instance, because we can make a better society. It has to be independent, but also somehow relevant for our society. It's two regimes with which we think about science. I think that we all could recognize that we both find important, and we should learn to deal with that in a good way, actually in a different and a difficult world now. We already heard a lot about this field of science, which is maybe one of the most important fields of science at the moment. Current societal debates make it very hard to have a good discussion about climate change. It's maybe for the first time in history that there's really very openly doubts from people in power about scientific facts. And that's quite a big thing. And maybe also a thing to take very seriously. Of course, I think it's easy to say to you that we think that this is a bad thing. But it's more important, I think, to try to understand why this is the case. Why do people follow leaders who deny the phenomenon of climate change, or who deny that it would be that it would be caused by humans? Maybe it's also because people feel powerless. They actually cannot do that much by themselves. They cannot afford to buy a Tesla. They have to drive their all polluting cars, etc. And then it's easy to follow maybe a leader who gives you a perspective, say, this is just nothing. Involving citizens in new ways and scientific facts might be a key to dealing with this. Also, the debate about vaccination is maybe a good example about that. In my country, the Netherlands, recently there was again a big debate because the vaccination goes down in our country up to a dangerous level. People believe in hoax articles that claim that you become autistic when you get vaccinated, etc. And scientists have a hard time, I think, dealing in an adequate way with this whole discussion. The adequate way is not anymore just to say, you're stupid, I know the truth, just listen to me, I'll explain it to you slowly, and then you will all get vaccinated. Because that doesn't work anymore in a society where citizens, well, actually try to have their own voice and want to enter into a debate. Maybe the fact that they come with articles, that they try actually to show that there is something wrong with the vaccines, could also be an opening for emancipation. And maybe we need to empower people more to also understand scientific research in order to really be emancipated in that respect. For technology, maybe the situation is different. We are in an age, as many people claim, of the fourth industrial revolution, where technologies and humans seem to compete for jobs, for the mind, etc. The fourth revolution is a contested concept, so I don't claim to be a historian, and I do understand that maybe you cannot really call it a revolution. But for the sake of the argument, it's interesting to say that there are these four waves of technologies. So the first one started with mechanization. The steam engine got invented. Then we entered into an era of mass production. Then the computer was invented, and we went into an era of automation. And now it's about artificial intelligence, AI, and the cyber-physical systems. It's an ugly word, basically, for saying that the digital world becomes physical. Technologies actually get embodied in our material world. We are not just an avatar on a screen in Second Life, but it's actually the Internet of Things. And a computer becomes a robot with a body, which means that the digital technologies enter in our societies and change our society. In Japan, I heard people are now working on the idea of Society 5.0 as a result of this fourth industrial revolution. With quite a deterministic picture, you could say that societies have gone through several stages of development, and don't take the years too seriously, because I think it differs over the globe. But the idea is the move from the hunter-gatherers to an agricultural society was made possible by a technology, the plow, which enabled people to live on one place. And then the steam engine resulted in the industrial society, the computer in the information society, and now artificial intelligence brings us to the super smart society. A society where our thinking seems to change, where we need to work with robots, expert systems that advise doctors, judges, who cannot always really understand how the systems came to their conclusions, but still have to make a decision on the basis of what a computer advises you. It seems to be a new stage in the development of the human mind, you could say. And that's, for instance, why it was already mentioned in an earlier talk, where UNESCO will vote tomorrow about the possibility to also work towards a recommendation on the ethics of AI. I will say a bit more about that later. But you can really imagine, for UNESCO, everything is about the mind. Science, education, culture. And the mind is what is at stake in a world of artificial intelligence. So also here, it is about shaping links between science, technology, and society. So as I said, the paradox can only be resolved if we try to let both hearts beat in science. If there is a certain amount of freedom from, a certain amount of independence, curiosity-driven research, independent research, but also an engaged form of doing research, involving citizens, working for society. So let's move to the next step. What could then that idea of open science mean? Maybe the interesting thing is that the medical field, for me, has always been some kind of a front runner in thinking about the relationship between technology and society and science and society. And why is that? I think because it's such a societal field. As a doctor, you see patients all the time, you have to communicate with citizens all the time. And I think we have, a few decades ago, made a transition from the doctor as the expert who would just say what is wrong with you, and you wouldn't even dare to ask why the doctor is saying that, towards a situation where actually, well, we are somehow emancipated. We want to understand why the doctor says that, and if we don't trust it, we actually want another doctor to give an opinion. A second opinion has become quite a normal word in the medical field. Whereas in science, if you would say science is just an opinion, and you can buy a t-shirt of people who get angry with that claim, just an opinion is the truth. So interestingly, in the medical field, we can be open to the idea that science is done by people. It's not just an opinion, but people arrive at a diagnosis on the basis of their expertise, and maybe another expert can bring in other expertise, extra intelligence, and together you arrive at a better diagnosis. So in the medical field, I think, interestingly, people are frontrunners, and therefore also interesting that, especially in the medical field, citizen science is really popping up. In Twente, the university where I work in the Netherlands, we just started a citizen lab where patients will actually work with doctors to investigate their own health. Not just as the people who do the research, like extra assistants of the medical team, but also as people who are involved in asking the right questions. They are the ones who experience the side effects of the medication. They are the ones who can say, maybe you should investigate this or you should investigate that. And maybe that's really the step that we need to make. This is a very famous Dutch scientist, Robert Dijkgraaf, former president of the Academy of Sciences, who maybe is the star in the Netherlands in science communication. He has TV shows, he teaches for many people, everybody likes it, everybody becomes very enthusiastic when he speaks about science. I think this is extremely important. And still, I believe that this form of connecting science and society also needs to be complemented with more. It is not just about explaining science to the audience. That's still top-down. The scientists are this separate class of people explaining to the people in society how nice and how cool science is, which is nice and which is cool, which we should stay doing, but there is more to do. So I think the new wave of open science involves many other things. It started out with open access. An important thing, of course. A lot of research is being done at the expense of the state, so it's quite natural maybe that if citizens want to read the results of that work, that they should be able to read that. But still, that is also a top-down model. The open science recommendation of UNESCO actually will focus on much more. It will really focus on opening science, opening a window to society in such a way that there can be a mutual kind of communication, involving a number of things. I'm not sure if this will be in the recommendation, obviously, but if I would make a guess, I would say one of the most important things is epistemic responsibility, which is also part of the science paradox. Epistemic, it's the facts, and responsibility, it's the norms. So how can you have epistemic responsibility? Well, it means we are responsible for the truth. We are responsible for equipping people with ways of thinking that can enable them to be critical, to look at science in a critical way also, and to be somehow empowered to deal with the growing influence of science and technology in our society. And that's of utmost importance for our democracies, you could say. Hannah Arendt already said that the biggest threat for a society is actually if we cannot make a distinction anymore between what is true and what is fake. And in that sense, disinformation is really excavating our democracy, you could say. If we do not equip people with the means to tell right from wrong, not only, but also true from false, we have a very big democratic issue. So that's epistemic responsibility, as scientists also engaging in a debate with the public to equip them to do that. And citizen science might be also the next level of involving people in science, not just to let them do the scientific work, which is also really important. Involving stakeholders is very interesting also, and it generates a community of people doing the research, but it's also co-creation, helping to form the questions that you will ask together with an audience. You can also, maybe, in a sense, empower people. In the Netherlands, at the Waag Society, people have been doing a very interesting project about empowerment of citizens with Internet of Things technologies. Citizen sensing, they called it. So people equipping their homes with sensors, for instance, that can measure air pollution, or the noise that is generated by aircraft or something. In Enschede, where I live, people got sensors to detect the water level in the ground, because many people claim that there is water in their houses, and the government says it's not true. And they say, well, let me measure it, and there's an open source website where you can check it. And this actually helps people to put issues on the agenda. So that's maybe a form of empowerment that we could also achieve when we empower people to do science in new ways. And that empowerment maybe also should be about helping people to raise ethical issues, ethical questions. I've been involved the past year in the production of this movie, Robin, which is both a male and a female name. It's a movie made in the Netherlands by the Netherlands Science Council to raise awareness of people for the impact of science and technology on our society. It's an interactive movie. So it starts with the birth of Robin, and after the first scene you have to make a choice what the parents will do. Will they share information about the baby on social media or not? And then you have to make other choices. So in the end there are 16 plots of the story. And you learn that your choices matter, and that actually different forms of technology shape different societies. These things could also help, I think, to empower people to think somewhat critically about science and technology. Now let's move to the third and last part of my talk. Responsible design. So connecting science and society is one thing. Open science, citizen science, empowering people. Connecting technology and society is maybe another thing, because the relations are different, and also more focusing around the fears that people could have. I already introduced the idea of the digital revolution. Maybe the most important thing that is happening there is that technologies are working on us as humans in totally new, different ways. I think our old idea of a technology would be that it is something that we use. We are the subject, technology is the object. We have the intentions, technology is the tool. David Bowie here behind the first Apple computer. You are in power of the technology. That's the idea. Technology is neutral, just like science could be neutral. But actually we have discovered over time that technology is not neutral at all. The kind of means that you use to realize your goal also affects your goals. People change, their normative frameworks change over time. And how these new technologies also work so deeply on us that we cannot even say that we use them anymore. They're integrated in our environment. Smart cities, smart homes, smart hospitals, smart shopping windows that can look at which item you are looking. With eye tracking technology, and then you look 2 milliseconds longer on that one little jacket, and then according to the theory of neuromarketing, your brain already knows that you want to buy it, but you don't know it yourself yet. So the lights go on a bit longer and you think, hey, that's a nice jacket, let me buy it. Do you use that technology? No. It uses you, in a sense. It's part of the environment that helps to shape the choices that you make. Technology does not only merge with our environment, also with ourselves. Implants in the brain, deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's patients, enabling people to walk again, but also affecting people's moods. The production of dopamine is being stimulated by this device, which can make people actually feel manic, hypomanic, making choices that they would never have made in other kind of situations. It's also quite a fundamental way of dealing with yourself. If the brain is the organ that gives us freedom, then we can now have the freedom to tweak our own freedom, in a sense. We develop a meta-freedom, in a sense. If you try to understand technologies from an anthropological lens, it's amazing what we're actually doing in our society. Well, you can go on with a long list. Augmentation, a second layer of reality. We see the world, and we also get information simultaneously about the world, a split relation with the world. interaction, really interacting with a robot that's also acting towards us, that understands us, that behaves in unexpected ways, that learns to behave through deep learning, which means that it starts to do things that the programmer never put into it, because it learns by interacting, just like humans do, up to cooperation, working together with an AI system. You and the system together have a relation to the world. The doctor has an AI system connected to your electronic patient record, and the doctor looks herself at you. And both come with an advice, and somehow you have to learn to deal with that new intentionality of the machine. Up to the fear that now people have, of course, about people being replaced somehow by technologies. They take our jobs, people fear, or they make our decisions. How can we deal with all those new configurations? I think the key here is that we try to give up the idea that humans and technologies should be opposed. That's actually a way of thinking about technology that indeed separates technology too much from society, just like we should not separate science too much from society. Because in practice, actually, the technologies that we use are part of us. They change us, they help to shape who we are, how we behave, what we do. It's interesting, if we look back in time, we do not have so much fear about technology. If we look to the future, we are afraid that the robots will take over. If we look back in time, we dig up old tools from our ancestors, and that helps us to understand what kind of lives these people lived. So in that sense, the difference between an iPhone and a hand axe is not that big, you could say. The hand axe enabled people to live in a specific way, and in the same way digital technologies do that with us. So we should see technologies more as mediators. Technologies are the channel that connects us to the world, the environment in which we live. They are the means, but they're also the medium, the mediator, the milieu, the environment, as it were. And that has quite a lot of implications. So if you then go back to the field of artificial intelligence, maybe it's also interesting to see that we have been there before, in a sense. We have been there before with technologies that helped to change our thinking. Technologies that we would not even recognize as such anymore because they have become completely normal. Writing, for instance, has had a lot of impact on our memory. Interestingly enough, of course, we still have texts of the first people who lived in the time that we started to write. Also philosophers, Socrates, Plato were living in those days, and they were really worried about writing because they feared that our memory would get lost. And they also feared that their ideas would start to travel over the world and that they would not be there anymore, or their students to explain what they really meant. And so, of course, this is the key of the textual culture that we live in. The printing press. The scientific revolution is the science form. We would never have had science without the printing press. It would still be a matter of the elite, within the elite in the monasteries, copying books. The democratization, the empowerment made possible by the press is enormous. So in that sense, I think AI might bring this new way of thinking, a new form of understanding the world, where we will have to learn to deal with the specific characteristics of artificial intelligence, not opposing ourselves to it, trying to shy away from it, not to see ethics as some kind of a border guard between humans and technologies. That's the negative ethics, that's saying what we should not do. But we should more look for positive ethics. How should we build a society that can flourish where AI is present? So technologies have a lot of impact on us and also on our thinking. And maybe that's what I want to conclude with. That technologies are not just interesting items to think about ethically, but they also change how we could do ethics. They are disruptive in a sense. Not only disruptive because they change our societies, but they also change the concepts that we need to do ethics. Let me give you an example in the field of robotics. Maybe you all know that in Saudi Arabia, the decision was made to grant Sophia, a humanoid robot, personhood for law. Well, that is quite a big decision, to grant personhood to a robot. So if you do that, that has a lot of implications for the most fundamental concepts with which we do ethics. So I want to tell you this because I think this is the stage that we are at. Of course, I don't really think that a robot is a person, but they become so person-like that it starts to make sense to blur the boundaries a bit. But if you do that, it has a lot of implications because persons have agency, they act. Robots act as well, but yeah, differently than humans. So should we revise our notion of agency to also include non-human agency? A robot, well, a human that acts, who acts, has responsibility. So should robots have responsibility? Or should we take responsibility for the robot? Are they moral agents or moral patients? Do they also deserve our respect, as moral agents normally do? And what kind of responsibility should we then build into the robots? Can we agree about that? Or should we allow the robots to have their own idiosyncratic forms of responsibility? Persons have human rights. So should we have robot rights? A bizarre idea for some people, but I spoke to a very interesting Japanese researcher about a year ago who came to Twente to give a talk about his work on robots that can feel pain. Can feel pain. It sounds bizarre. Maybe it is, because I would not really know what it means for a robot to feel pain. But what his point was that he tries to mimic the development of babies to let the algorithms learn. So not just working with all kinds of categories to understand the world, but simply working with sensations that are pleasant or that hurt. So it makes you think, okay, if we start to develop robots that can feel pain, do we at some point reach a situation where we need to somehow protect them from that pain? Bizarre questions, but not a crazy question. Or you could also say, if we connect ourselves intricately to the robots, if we become dependent when we are old and the robots take care of us, should actually our own rights be extended to the robots? Could we say, you can never destroy the robot because actually the robot has become part of me? Big question. One concept changes and everything changes. Last example, the ambition to work with technical means against climate change. Scary means, I would say, but maybe also interesting ways. For instance, our ambitions to dim the sun, to bring particles in the stratosphere that can reflect part of the sunlight so that actually less solar energy would reach the planet. That also raises a lot of very fundamental ethical questions and also challenges the concepts with which we can do ethics. So if we design the climate system, is there still something like nature, or has nature then become an artifact if it has become totally designed? What's still natural about the climate then? And of course it imposes a lot of risks on our society. Maybe we cool down too much and the earth would become uninhabitable, maybe it's irreversible. So how could you ever make a decision? How could you justify the risk? Who should take the risk? Who could be at risk? Is it the people who live now, the future generations? Also the oceans, or only humans who have rights here? How can we control this? Since the climate system is not a system that works like you just turn a knob and then something happens. It's so complex. What does a notion of control mean, and how much control do you need to have in order to act somehow responsibly? Again, who has the moral rights to be protected? And how can a democracy deal with this? If democracy is based on the idea of representation, who is going to represent the future generations? Who is going to represent nature? How could we represent nature? Could we do that or not? Should we revise the notion of democracy? Big questions, which shows that ethics is not simply about should we do it or should we not do it, yes or no. That's the negative ethics. If we want to work towards positive ethics, it's all about how. How could we connect ourselves in a positive way to technologies, just like we could connect ourselves in a positive way to science? So let me end with a wall painting from the UNESCO building, a painting by Picasso. Actually, I only discovered after a few years being in that building that it was made by Picasso. And actually, he was also very angry, I heard, because when they constructed the building, he made a beautiful painting, and then they made a bridge in the building, which actually makes it impossible to see the entire painting from most of the angles. So he did not sign the painting because he was angry. So the story goes. I'm not sure if it's an urban myth, but it's a nice story. But what I want to tell you is what's on the painting. It's the Icarus figure, Icarus falling. And I really believe that that myth is a perfect illustration of what we should do to achieve open science and to achieve responsible design. Because it's all about science and technology and how to deal with that in a responsible way, but then in the words of the ancient Greeks. So in the myth, Daedalus is the inventor in the ancient times, is called to Crete because the Minotaur is there. It's a creature half bull, half human. It's a scary creature. It creates damage, it kills people, they want to get rid of it, but it's really strong, they don't know how to handle it. So Daedalus, the engineer, has to come with a trick. And he thinks a bit, and he says, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a labyrinth. We're going to chase it in. It's really strong, but it's also really stupid. It will never find its way out of the labyrinth, and you are free from the Minotaur. And so happened. They were free. Then he wanted to go back to Athens with his son, and so his son is Icarus. And then the king said, sorry, that will not be possible, because you now know the main secret in our society. You have the key to our society in a sense. You have to remain a prisoner here until you die. You can go wherever you want, but you can never go back to Athens. So then they were sitting on the beach, sad, and then suddenly they saw the birds flying back to Athens. And of course, then the engineer thought, why should we accept the limitations of the human being? The scientific engineering approach. Always try to do something new and to understand things better and to do innovation. So out of wax and feathers and pieces of wood, they built wings. And they started to practice, and after a while, they could both fly. But just before they went, Daedalus gave this wise advice to his son Icarus, and that's the ethics that I hope that I can convey to you in this talk as well. He said, now you have to be really careful. Don't fly too low, because if you fly too low, the feathers of your wings will absorb the water of the sea, you'll get too heavy, and you will fall. So don't be a coward. Don't be afraid of new technologies, of innovation. Don't be afraid to engage with our society. Don't fly too high either. If you fly too high, you'll be too close to the sun, the wax will melt, your wings will disintegrate, you'll fall as well. Don't be overcourageous. Don't just do anything because you can. You have to find the right middle between these two extremes, maybe also between the two poles of the science paradox, between freedom from and freedom for. You also have to keep flying. If you stop flying, you will also fall. Innovation will go on, science will go on. And I think that's maybe the main message that I want to give to you. We should learn to trust ourselves to technologies, and we should learn to trust science to our society, finding a good balance between negative, positive freedom. Thank you very much.